The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show. It was January 25th, 2019, that 29 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear and wearing night goggles, brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, surrounded and then swarmed my home. They arrived in 17 armored vehicles. There was a FBI helicopter overhead. 2 amphibious units pulled up to the dock in my backyard. I lived then on the Isles section of Fort Lauderdale, where frogmen jumped out on the dock, also brandishing assault weapons. They came to arrest me in a $1.1 million taxpayer-funded made-for-television drama when they could have simply told my attorneys that I would be charged with the unlikely crime of lying under oath in my voluntary testimony to the House Intelligence Committee regarding Russian collusion, which we now know definitively, based on the declassified documents released by Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, never actually happened. It was a stunning overreach by the federal government, allowed me to raise $3.2 million in small contributions for my legal defense. But CNN just happened, on the basis, according to them, of their shrewd investigative reporting, to have a camera crew 25 feet from my front door when I was arrested. You can hear the scene here.
This is what the first sounds that Roger Stone knew this morning was the FBI pounding on his door and shouting this. I want to just play this for a moment.
FBI, open the door.
Now, CNN actually won an award from the White House Correspondents Association for their shrewd investigative reporting, which is nonsense because I was arrested at 6:06 a.m. in the morning. And at 6:22, Sarah Murray of CNN texted my attorney to tell him that I had been arrested, and then subsequently texted him a copy of the draft of my sealed criminal indictment, which would not be unsealed until 4 hours later by a D.C. magistrate. There were no court markings or timestamps on the documents, so CNN's claim that they got it online is a reprehensible lie. But if you look at the metadata tags in the draft, it has the initials of the man who wrote it, therefore the man who leaked it in violation of federal law, Andrew Weissman, widely known as the single most corrupt federal prosecutor in U.S. history, a man who got his start covering up mob murders in Brooklyn, went on to destroy the Enron company and Arthur Andersen, their accounting firm. Those convictions reversed 9-0 by the U.S. Supreme Court, and then went on to be the de facto head of the Mueller witch hunt, where he destroyed evidence that was under subpoena by special counsel John Durham. This week, however, John Bolton had his home in Washington raided. To me, this is just desserts for this mustachioed warmonger and one of the most insidious subverters of the law within the previous administration. It was John Bolton, serving as National Security Advisor in 2018, who played a key role in convincing President Donald Trump to reverse his September 17th, 2018 order to declassify the documents related to the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation. This is the essence of the Russian collusion hoax. Those documents, including the involvement of an FBI informant, Stephen Halper, who was paid $500,000 of your tax dollars for his role in this shameful scandal, was completely concealed from the American people. 4 days later, on September 21st, 2018, Trump was pushed by Bolton into backing off the full declassification after input from the Department of Justice, the FBI, and certain of our foreign allies, all raising concerns about potential damage to our national security, our intelligence sources and methods, and our ongoing relationships with some of our international partners. Bolton advised the president on these risks and coordinated this reversal. After the Mar-a-Lago raid, which happened in 2023, Bolton repeatedly talked about sensitive sources that were in the documents that President Trump had. Let's be very clear. Under the Presidential Documents Act, President Donald Trump was entitled to have any document he wanted to retain. He could declassify anything simply by touching it. These documents, now released to the public, were those exact same Crossfire Hurricane documents. The sensitive source of these documents, again, was Stephen Halpert, a CIA and FBI operative who was then using the code name Mitch. Halper was the architect of the so-called Hillary plan. That is a plan that Tulsi Gabbard has proven through declassification was approved by Hillary Clinton to create the entire false narrative that Russian intelligence had assisted in the election of Donald Trump in 2016 in order to, quote, distract attention from her use of an illegal email server and also to, quote, sow doubt about the legitimacy of Donald Trump's presidency. Bolton was covering up for Obama, Clinton, Brennan, Comey, and the rest of the Obama cabal. Because if those documents had been released then, the Russian collusion narrative would have been exposed as a paid-for dirty trick by the Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI, and those at the highest level of our government under Barack Obama. When Congressman Devin Nunes, who as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, uncovered that CIA operative Stephen Halper was the architect of the Russian hoax, he was threatened with criminal prosecution if he tried to investigate further. President Trump tried to declassify the documents, but he got blocked by Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, acting as the acting Attorney General, CIA Director Gina Haspel, FBI Director Christopher Wray, the aforementioned John Bolton, as well as a hefty shove from the British government, who were in this scheme up to their knees. They all claimed that the sources involved, lives and allied operations, would be endangered. In fact, it was the deep state that was endangered. When President tried to release those documents once again in 2021, well, his home in Mar-a-Lago, his palatial spot there in Palm Beach, was raided. The report by Special Counsel John Durham finally exposed Crossfire Hurricane as a fraud built on taxpayer-funded lies. Yet Stephen Halper, the CIA FBI asset, was the linchpin. Yet Bolton and Comey weaponized this whole sources and methods narrative in order to block transparency. Their real fear? It was exposing how Obama-era bureaucrats had laundered Clinton's conspiracy through the FBI. John Bolton retained a copy of those documents. He used them illegally in his book, and that was the purpose of the raid on his home and office. Strangely enough, CNN was not at his doorstep to film that, but lawyer George Conway was present at that very early morning. If that name sounds familiar, he is the guy who came up with the scheme to extend the statute of limitations under New York state law for the crime of sexual assault. This was done so that a woman named E. Jean Carroll could claim, I believe falsely, that Donald Trump had assaulted her in a dressing room at the posh department store Bergdorf Goodman. Turns out that the designer dress that E. Jean Carroll said she was wearing on the day of the assault, she was photographed for the cover of New York Magazine in it, was neither designed or even manufactured on the date she claimed that she was assaulted. But little did Conway know that this small change in New York state law would snag both former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Eric Adams, both of them facing sexual assault lawsuits because of this change in the law. The Durham report obviously exposed this, but now Tulsi Gabbard's declassification actions finally tore down this wall of secrecy, proving that the national security excuses were just deep state panic over their own crimes. Transparency isn't optional. It is the antidote to all of this corruption. Every redaction they fought to keep hidden only validates Trump's push to drain the swamp. So the raid on John Bolton could not have come to a more deserving fellow. As I said in jest, Bolton put out a statement on Friday specifically denying that he'd appropriated his mustache from one of the Village people. It is not an incident of Donald Trump going after his political opponents, but rather it is swamp draining 101 that we are experiencing. Bolton and others must be charged for their crimes, the crime being seditious conspiracy to engage in treason, and they must be brought to justice. I am convinced, based on all my sources, that a federal prosecutor has been designated and grand juries in South Florida, New York, and D.C. are already hearing testimony against those involved in the biggest single dirty trick and abuse of power in which the full authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capabilities of our intelligence agencies were used to try to undo the 2016 election. I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks. And whatever you do, don't touch that dial because we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
In 2015, I wrote a book called The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. And more than just laying out what I think was a conspiracy that involved the CIA, organized crime, Big Texas Oil, and others, directed by Lyndon Johnson, it was also a profile of Johnson himself, a man who was a liar, a drunk, a pill popper, a racist, a bully, a sadist, a man who very famously conducted White House meetings while sitting on the toilet just to make his senior staff uncomfortable. Listen to this audio of President Lyndon Johnson talking to the head of the Farah clothing company.
Hello? Hello. Mr. Hager?
Yes, this is Joe Hager.
Joe, is your father the one that makes clothes?
Yes, sir. We're all together.
You all made me some real lightweight slacks. He just made up on his own, sent to me 3 or 4 months ago. It's a kind of a light brown and a light green, rather soft green and soft brown.
Yes, sir.
Now, I need about 6 pairs for summer wear.
Yes, sir.
So I need about 6 pairs to wear around in the evening when I come in from work.
Yes, sir.
And I can send you a pair. I want them a ½ inch larger in the waist than they were before, except I want 2 or 3 inches of stuff left back in there so I can take them up. I vary 10 to 15 pounds a month.
All right, sir.
So leave me at least 2.5, 3 inches in the back where I can let them out or take them up, and make these a ½ inch bigger in the waist. Make the pockets at least 1 inch longer. My money and my knife and everything fall out. Wait just a minute. Hello?
Hello.
Now, another thing, the crotch down where you hang is always a little too tight. So when you make them up, give me 1 inch that I can let out there, because they cut me. They're just like riding a wire fence. These are the best that I've had anywhere in the United States.
Right.
But when I gain a little weight, they cut me under there. So leave me, you never do have much margin there. Let's see if you can't leave me about 1 inch from where the zipper ends, round under my back to my.
All right, sir.
So I can let it out there if I need to.
Okay.
Now, be sure you got the best zippers in them. These are good that I have. And if you get those to me, I would sure be grateful.
Where would you like to send, please?
White House?
All right.
I just sure will appreciate this. I need it more than anything. And now, you give this boy the address, because I'm running for a funeral, and give him address just how to dress these trousers. So we'll send them to you. And don't you get the measurements out of them and add a half inch to the back, give us an inch to the pockets, and about an inch underneath so we can let them out.
In other words, you like just a little more stride in the crotch.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, here he is.
I'm glad that you enjoyed the others.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So that was the President of the United States. I thought the belch in the middle of it was particularly becoming. Lyndon Johnson was one crude individual, but as I say, he conducted meetings while sitting on the toilet, not because he was crude, but because he was a sadist and he had inherited this Ivy League staff from President John F. Kennedy. He enjoyed tormenting them as they had tormented him when he was vice president. We talk about history here on the Roger Stone Show as well as politics. Coming up, we have former Assistant Secretary of the HHS under Donald Trump, Michael Caputo, is going to talk to us about the war on cancer that is being waged in the new effort to make America healthy again. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with Michael Caputo, but also former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, who says President Trump must act aggressively to do something about the rise in crime in the Windy City.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is Michael Caputo. Michael Caputo served as Assistant Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services under President Donald Trump. He was a key early staffer in Donald Trump's 2016 and his 2024 comeback campaigns. Because of the need for full disclosure, he's also one of my oldest and closest friends. He's an expert on communications. He is a cancer survivor, as is my wife, Nidia. And he's taken it on a personal mission, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to help in the early diagnosis and treatment of cancer, which is rising, unfortunately, among young people in this country. Mike Caputo, you've had a wild ride with your cancer while detected while you were senior executive HHS back during the COVID pandemic. You've got quite a story to tell, starting with, well, I guess, how your cancer was discovered.
Well, first things first, Roger, now that I've been publicly labeled as one of your oldest and dearest friends, we know that I'm going to be targeted by the next Mueller investigation.
That's
so
for
thanks
sure.
For that. Yeah, I mean, Roger, I got into this whole Trump thing, through you, as you remember. And, when I was, after the Russiagate stuff, we'll probably get into that. I went through the whole thing, not half as much as you did. But after it all went away, and then COVID came in not a year later, the president asked me to take charge of communications as Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs over at HHS. We all remember communications were a mess in the beginning of the pandemic. Of course, it's impossible to predict this. But when I was there, of course, very stressful, working with all the different doctors, trying to put some on TV, keep others off TV, working with the messages coming out of the COVID task force, Operation Warp Speed, come at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then right in the middle of it all, I got sick. I mean, it was strange because after one of these Operation Warp Speed meetings, I had Dr. Robert Redfield of the CDC at my office at HHS right after the meeting, and we were sitting there, and my phone rang. And you remember, Roger, I was real fat. He used to give me crap about it all the time, 300 pounds. And I turned my head, and Redfield poked me in the neck, and he says, "What's that, Michael?" It was my lymph node. It was hard as a rock. You couldn't even see it because I had a neck of fat, right? But, of course, the CDC director of the United States discovered that I had cancer, and they sent me fast. And they told the president, they told the HHS secretary, Alex Azar, and they sent me as quick as you could over to the National Institutes for Health, where the Surgeon-in-Chief of the United States was waiting for me with the head of the National Cancer Institute. I was getting the the care of a sultan, thanks to the president. And I went in there, and within 3 hours, they had taken out my lymph node, which, by the way, they don't do that. It's hard to do. If you poke somebody's lymph node while they got cancer, that lymphatic fluid goes throughout the body, and you're a dead man. But the Surgeon in Chief of the United States knew how to do it. He took it out, and my life went into the crapper from there on. I had throat cancer. It was pretty well advanced. It's a stress-driven disease. As you know, Roger, Nedia's cancer was also stress-driven. And we were all under so much stress during that whole Russiagate stuff. And then COVID, how many Americans got sick, not even with COVID, just with the terrible maladies that were going around from the stress of it all. And I spent the next several months in the hospital. It was really quite something. But the one thing I remember more than anything, beyond how it affected my own body and my family, is I was going for every day, 36 days, for head and neck radiation treatments. And I met these 3 young kids that were going into the radiation unit every day. We all went daily. When I first met them, we all walked in, and then some weeks later, they were in wheelchairs. And then these 3 little kids, not even 7, 8, 9, ended up in gurneys. And then they were unresponsive when they came into the waiting room, and then they were gone. And I'll never forget, it just hit so hard that these little kids are getting sick with a cancer that shouldn't be passing through those ages. And the problem is, Roger, as you and I have talked about, we're focused on this. We all should be. The kids are getting cancer more than ever before.
We will talk about that here in just a little bit. After you were diagnosed, you went back to Buffalo, a place you came from, a place that we've both achieved history when Carl Palladino took on the Republican establishment from New York State and crushed them in a Republican primary for governor, briefly led Andrew Cuomo in the polls until the fake news media in New York State, of which there is plenty, kicked into high gear. It's interesting to go look back at that because if you recall, Carl Palladino said that Andrew Cuomo was a shameless womanizer. He said that Sheldon Silver, the Speaker of the Assembly, was a crook, and that the Senate Majority Leader, whose name escapes me at this moment, that the Senate Majority Leader at the time... This call is
no longer being recorded.
I'm sorry about that. That's my stupid phone, Roger.
So he also said that the Senate Majority Leader was a crook. His campaign, of course, collapsed in a shambles. Carl Palladino turned out to be right about all 3 of those things. Andrew Cuomo lost the governorship because of claims of sexual harassment. Sheldon Silver went to prison for epic corruption, and the Senate Majority Leader was forced to step down and also went to prison. It's amazing. Carl Palladino turned out to be right about all of it. But when you got back to Buffalo, because of your high-profile support for Donald Trump, Antifa really came for you, didn't they?
They did. And, that kind of came when you and I were running the Palladino campaign. It started then. I mean, I came back home to Buffalo after being away for 25 years, brought my family up there in my little hometown of East Aurora, New York. And then I signed on with Palladino, and he was a fire starter and a conversation starter, if you say that. And then, Roger, you said this before. He was kind of the predecessor to Donald Trump, because if you remember, the slogan that you came up with for Carl Palladino was, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." And that was really a seed of a message that Donald Trump took out much wider and much louder. But of course, as Buffalo, the home of 6 or 7 different universities, one of the most active Democrat socialist parties in the country, these people went wild on my family and I because of my Trump support. And then when I came back sick, they were outside my house protesting, scaring the daylights out of my children, chasing my 7-year-old daughter down the road. And at night, Roger, they're just such sick people. At night, when they knew I had to get sleep to recover from cancer, they would stand outside my house and throw pebbles at my window to keep me awake. Really sick people. And it kept going and going. Well, then, end of February, Roger, if you remember, suddenly I was met with, February 21, I was met with a no evidence of disease diagnosis. Again, it was a shock to all of us. They thought they had gone from my throat to my brain, but because the president made sure that I got operated on that day when they first discovered it, it never went to my brain. It was 4 inches away from my lymph node, and it didn't get to my brain. Thank God, and thank Donald Trump and the great surgeons over at the NIH. But in February, when the president invited me and my kids and my wife to Mar-a-Lago after the diagnosis turned out real great, and I told him, he said, "How are things?" I said, "Well, the other day we found a torch on my front porch. They tried to burn our house down," and he just was shocked that little tiny East Aurora, New York, there was that kind of violence and intimidation going on. And we left, Roger, if you remember. It was a real hard thing for us to do. My hometown where I grew up. We left and we moved down to the center of the Everglades, this little town called Ave Maria, a town of great faith, a Catholic town in the middle of the Everglades. And that's where I fell into bed and laid there and recovered. I mean, it was a wild ride. You're right.
Well, Michael, look, I've experienced this myself. I bet I could match you death threat for death threat. But the good Lord has protected both of us and our families. Your recovery from cancer is nothing less than a miracle. It is due to the fact that you're redeemed in the blood of the cross. It is due to your faith. We both know that. The entire Russian collusion hoax was an incredibly stressful thing for both of us. It's interesting because I think we both testified under oath that we had never met with any Russians, and then we both recalled a meeting with a man who called himself Hank Greenberg. You had actually, I think he contacted you first. He insisted that he had vital information on Hillary Clinton that could be of value to the Trump campaign. You asked me to meet with him. I delayed quite a while before I did meet with him. And it was a very, very short meeting. He said, "I have this information that's very damaging to Hillary Clinton. I think would really help Donald Trump." And I said, "Well, I'd have to see it first to see if it has any value." He said, "Well, that's going to cost you $2 million. And I said, "Hey, you don't understand. I don't have $2 million. And if I did have $2 million, I wouldn't spend it on opposition research." And he said, "It's not your money I want. It's Donald Trump's money." And I said, "Well, you really don't understand Donald Trump. He's not paying $2 million for information on Hillary Clinton. So, Mr. Greenberg," which is, of course, not his real name, "this meeting is over." And I left. And as you know, we found out shortly thereafter that Hank Greenberg, I think you know his real name, he was a Russian national, convicted of violent crimes in Russia, only allowed in the United States because he was an FBI informant. And his visa had been signed by the head of the FBI office in Miami. He was there to set both you and I up, but I didn't take the bait. When you go to Robert Mueller's final unredacted report, which we had to fight with the judge to get, and ultimately it was only made public because BuzzFeed sued the Justice Department, they reduce the references to Mr. Greenberg to one sentence saying Stone met with Greenberg, who was not an agent of the Russian government. They failed to mention that Mr. Greenberg was an FBI informant, that they ran in on both of them. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Michael Caputo, former Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Michael's efforts to bring people aware of the rise of cancer. He's going to talk about the importance of early diagnosis and what folks can do to protect themselves from this scourge. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Roger Stone Show. We're listening to Michael Caputo, former Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. Michael, young Americans are being diagnosed with cancers at rates that defy medical expectation and public assumption. Cancers, once considered diseases of old age, are now appearing with startling frequency in adolescents, 20, 30, others. This is not a blip. Seems to be a national alarm bell signaling that our current screening system is missing a generation. So while the U.S. debates marginal adjustments to decades-old guidelines, young lives are being lost to cancers that, if we could detect earlier, could be cured, but only if we look. What's going on here, Michael, and what is the answer?
Well, Roger, this is really perplexing for me, and I first discovered it watching children die in the hospital, while I was waiting in line for my cancer treatments, and they were too. And it really comes down to this. We are working with an outdated system. Roger, they never even ask people if they've got symptoms of cancer, never even screen you until you're 40. And so many of these cancers that are appearing in younger and younger people, many, children, as well as a lot of adolescents and young 20s, it's never really saw it before. And now we lead the world in these kinds of cancers, certainly in the first world. And it's really outrageously, I want to say stupid, but it's not. It's rather silly that we don't do what it takes. And Bobby Kennedy certainly understands that earlier diagnosis is really an important part of it. We have the colonoscopy and pap smears. These allow us to detect, changes in the body before cancer even forms. In the future, we should have more colonoscopy and pap smears type tests for other cancers so we can find those mutations before they do the body harm. And so much of this stuff is showing up in children. And what's really important here, Roger, and I think the president's really onto this, and Bobby certainly is how we can utilize artificial intelligence to get after this. We have boatloads and buckets and barrels full of data from cancer from, for the past couple of decades. It's just too immense of a project to analyze that data to do the public good. But now with AI, we certainly can. We can take all that data, feed it into one of the AI projects that the president is developing, perhaps something completely designed for cancer diagnosis, and find what's getting these kids sick. And not only diagnose it, but, pre-diagnose it. For example, we can just use data to determine if a child even needs to see a doctor. There's so much open field in front of us, so much promise. And after going through cancer myself, I just got to tell you, these kids should not be treated with such toxic such toxic treatments. Roger, I had chemotherapy, cisplatin, they called it. Thank God for Roswell Park in Buffalo. They saved my life. But I was allergic to cisplatin, and the first time they gave it to me, I went into a crazy shock. And I lost my hearing pretty much because I have a 10 out of 10 tinnitus. Roger, I'm an old man, still younger than you, thank goodness, but I'm an old man. Maybe I have to deal with this for 25, 30 years. Can you imagine one of those 7-year-olds in the same treatments I was in, having to put up with it for 80 years? 10 out of 10 tinnitus? We can't be treating these children with toxic, and we can find non-toxic ways to do it. They're already out there. And I think Dr. Bhattacharya, NIH, is totally devoted to that.
Well, Mike, you're right about one thing. I am 72 years old, but trust me, I'm just warming up. And my birthday is next week, August 27th, which ironically is the same birth date for one Lyndon Baines Johnson, a man that I was destined to expose as one of the worst and most corrupt presidents in the United States. I do have to ask you this in about the 2 minutes we have left. You had to work with Dr. Anthony Fauci at HHS. How did you find that experience?
Well, I'll tell you, I work with all of them. Dr. Redfield, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Hahn, Dr. Jerome Adams, the Surgeon General. And my experience with Fauci was different than other people's. Now, I can tell you, I believe that the COVID virus was started in the Wuhan lab where we were, paying for experiments on it. And Fauci fought against that tooth and nail. When I came in, he was the only doctor really on TV, and we just kind of flooded the zone with more doctors to try to get more diversity of opinion out there. And I know that there's a lot of very close look going on with Tony Fauci and the origin of the COVID virus today. But I do want to say that when I got sick, I got very sick, and I had two different treatment plans in front of me, and I couldn't make my mind up. And the word around HHS and the White House is that Michael can't make his mind up, and he's going to get sicker and sicker. I got a call from Fauci, and he asked me if he could help. And Fauci put together a panel of highest level doctors, the head of the National Cancer Institute, others, and they called both treatment groups, and then they analyzed it and came back and said, go with treatment plan number 2. You know, that's not the Tony Fauci everybody thinks about, but Tony Fauci really helped me in my illness. And in a lot of ways, a lot of the doctors did, you know. But I understand people's anger with Tony. I just had a bit of a different experience. All
right, fair enough. I think he lied before Congress about the taxpayer financing of the
I think he lied to us during the COVID response. Right, he lied to the president.
All right, we've settled that, and we obviously agree. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today in the Roger Stone Show. Folks, when we come back, former Governor Rod Blagojevich of Illinois is going to talk to us why he thinks the president must take action to make the city of Chicago a safer place where they have a crime epidemic akin to what we're seeing in New York City and in Washington, D.C. So whatever you do, don't go away. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Chicago, much like the District of Columbia, is undergoing a surge in violent crime. A very interesting piece in the Illinois Review by former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich and Mark Vargas, the editor and publisher of the Illinois Review, points out that while Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson tout drops in homicides, robberies, and shootings, the fact is that Chicago is a city that remains in crisis. If you need proof, Chicago continues to lead the nation in murders, shootings, and youth victims. In mass shootings, the city would rank second only to California if it was a state. More than 90% of Chicago's violent offenders roam free each day because, unfortunately, Illinois has followed the example of New York City and done away with cash bail. This echoes the policies of the Ayatollah Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat candidate for mayor of New York City, who actually wants to do away with the enforcement of all misdemeanor offenses entirely, according to a piece in today's New York Post. This is on top of his opposition to cash bail and his efforts to defund the police. The Mamdani insists that violence is a social construct. No, I think violence is extraordinarily dangerous. It is an absolute fact that most American cities are having a surge in crime. The city of Chicago continues to struggle as well with a severe police shortage, leaving over 1,600 vacancies in the force and fewer officers patrolling the streets. In 2023 alone, more than 225,000 high-priority 9/11 calls, such as shots fired or assault in progress, went completely unanswered, putting residents and visitors across the Windy City in very grave danger. After Illinois ended the crash, after Illinois ended cash bail in September 2023, more than 67,000 defendants skipped out on their court dates. This is only getting worse as people are only getting postcards with new hearings instead of actually facing arrest. Since 2022, more than 52,000 illegal migrants have arrived in Chicago, regardless of their background or criminal history, which is costing taxpayers nearly $700 million and putting residents at risk. In January, shortly after taking office, President Trump ordered the FBI, the the ATF, that's the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the DEA, U.S. Marshals, and the Customs and Border Protection Agency to carry out targeted operations to arrest dangerous migrants on the streets. The results are clear. What we have is a surge of crime in all of these cities. How did these dangerous criminals and predators end up in Chicago? Well, it may be because Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson support housing illegal immigrants under the city's sanctuary city designation. Pardon me here, I have a little technical issue I'm dealing with. But joining us now to talk about this, a man who has had a very interesting life, Governor Rod Blagojevich. They like to say he was Roger Stone before I was Roger Stone. Rod Blagojevich was targeted in an outrageous operation in which he refused essentially the direct orders of Barack Obama to appoint Valerie Jarrett to the open Senate seat created by Barack Obama's election to the presidency. He was framed in a crime which still boggles the mind. They wiretapped him, but they refused to play the fruits of those wiretaps at his trial. And they have refused to release the FBI's 302, which is the transcript, in essence, the written transcript of his interview with the FBI. Rod Blagojevich first had his sentence commuted by President Donald Trump, ultimately given a full and unconditional pardon. He is a great American success story. Yet another American, like General Flynn, like Donald Trump himself, targeted for destruction by the deep state. I'm honored to have my friend Rod Blagojevich join us now.
Hey, Roger, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk to you.
You continue to amaze me. I saw you the other night. I think it was on Fox. I'm not sure, but you love your state. You love your country. You've been a very harsh critic of the policies of both Governor J.B. Pritzker, a man who is so fat he has his own zip code. When J.B. Pritzker graduated from high school, his picture was on page 41, 42, and 43 of his yearbook. Sorry, I just can't resist. Last time J.B. Pritzker was in New York, they wanted to make him his own borough, to be honest with you. In any event, enough joking around. You have a very serious crime problem in Chicago, a city I know you love. The late Richard J. Daley, I don't mean Richie Daley, I mean the original Richard J. Daley, one of the greatest mayors in American history, certainly probably the greatest mayor in Chicago history. They used to call Chicago the city that worked. He would be rolling in his grave if he saw what's happening today. So tell us about this crisis and what should be done about it.
Well, Roger, Chicago is a great city with great people in it. It's really a beautiful city, and it's always good when you're here. You make it even better, because I had a chance to have dinner with you here. But we have, of course, failed leadership. We've got a mayor who's in over his head, and we have a governor who's really disgraceful in so many ways, because he has this inherited wealth that he received from the Hyatt hotel fortune. He's worth several $1 billion, none of it earned, all of it inherited. And he's used this money to basically buy himself a governor's position, spending over $350 million of his own money. And when you're a guy like that and you've had that good fortune with all that money, you would think that once you ascend the position of governor, you would use the power of that office and the fact that you don't need these politicians to, keep your family fed, and do the right things. And sometimes the right things are not the easy things to do, although oftentimes the right thing is the thing that's filled with common sense. And government's responsibility, first and foremost, is to keep all of us safe. And Illinois and Chicago is failing terribly at that, and it's because of some of the things you just talked about, the no-cash bail laws, which defy common sense, and those numbers of 60,000 or better people who fled, haven't come back to court, is no surprise. I spent 2 years as a Cook County prosecutor when I was starting out, prosecuting exactly those cases that now the guys who've been charged with crimes don't have to come to court. They're not going to come to court. And it's nothing dramatic, or it's not a big surprise. It's just common sense. So the fact that the politicians, Brandon Johnson, Pritzker, that Democrats in particular in Illinois and in Chicago have abandoned the police, the fact that the police and morale in the police department is very low, the fact that a lot of people don't want to become police officers anymore for all the understandable reasons. It's an inherently dangerous job. They're completely, they're not protected by the Democratic politicians in cities like Chicago, states like Illinois. And you have gangbangers in our city that outnumber police officers almost 10 to 1. There's more than 100,000 gangbangers to 12,000 police officers. So we have a crisis, and we have a need to fill the gap. And President Trump is offering that by sending the National Guard and also suggesting that he would send other federal agents to shore up and beef up law enforcement in Chicago. Now, I spent 8 years in prison, Roger, on politics, not on crimes. So I think I know better than just about anybody in the political world, you know, how criminals operate, because I live with them every single day for 2,896 days. And this won't surprise anybody with common sense. But when the cat's away, the mice play. These guys are always on the lookout, my colleagues in prison. When the cops weren't around, it was time to go out and do the illegal things, break the rules, and, you know, make your life better in that bad position place that we were in. It's no different on the streets. And so when the gangbangers know that the cops are not protected by the politicians, and when they outnumber the cops like they do what they do. And as a result, we have in Chicago high crime and high violent crime. You can honestly say, Roger, that when you wake up in Chicago, you can honestly say that every day someone's going to be murdered. You can also say that 8 out of 10 of those people are black who are going to be murdered. And in better than 9 out of 10 cases, they're black and brown people. So if the Democrats really believe that black lives matter, why is it they don't take up President Trump on his offer and do something to stop the killing in the black neighborhoods? Because Chicago is a diverse city, and the neighborhood I live in and a lot of the neighborhoods in parts of the city that are not in the black communities or the Latino communities are largely safe. They're not perfectly safe, but they're largely safe. Where the violence is occurring, where the murders are occurring, are in the black communities. The Democrats claim to be the friends of the black community, and they're not. And it's a form of hypocrisy and a form of racism. When Pritzker and Johnson refuse the help of Trump to actually make black lives safe, when they resist efforts to do so and instead prioritize the needs of migrants who came to Chicago and came to Illinois illegally.
Well, President Donald Trump clearly seriously considering mobilizing the National Guard. He's allowed to do so in the event of a national emergency. He's the one who gets to decide whether it's emergency, not J.B. Pritzker, who's so busy running for president when he's not harboring Texas state legislators who are trying to prevent a quorum to pass a U.S. census-based congressional redistricting plan in Texas. I'm prepared to predict right now that J.B. Pritzker, no matter how much he spends, will not be the Democrat nominee for president in 2028. And if we're fortunate enough to have him be selected for that position, he will get beat by a drum by the Republican nominee, whoever that is. We're talking to Rod Blagojevich, an American hero, a man whose faith sustained him in the penal system and who has come out stronger, more vibrant, and a greater believer than ever before. We'll be right back with more of Governor Rod Blagojevich right here on The Roger Stone Show. Please don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're talking to Governor Rod Blagojevich. Rod, I am so happy that President Donald Trump recognized that your conviction on corruption charges was one of the great political and legal frame jobs of all time. It was a completely motivated and a baseless conviction based on the fact that you refused essentially the orders of Barack Obama to appoint his chosen successor to a vacant U.S. Senate seat. And the way your trial was conducted, where the government refused to actually produce the evidence against you, was very evocative of what I went through. The judge refused to give me Robert Mueller's fully unredacted final report because on page 178, he admitted that he'd found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. So they had to jack me up on process crimes. They said I lied about the Russian collusion, which we now know never really happened. I'm particularly interested, Governor, in the 302s. That's the FBI agent's written report on the interview that was taken with Barack Obama regarding your case. Now, I can see no reason why it would not be in the public interest for the Department of Justice and the FBI to release these documents. What are the prospects of that happening? And, well, do you agree with me?
Well, I completely agree with you. And, I think my deeds match my creeds, because we've been trying to get those 302s since I was arrested. Because I was arrested at 6 o'clock in the morning at my house on the morning of December the 9th, 2008, with SWAT teams, 24-member SWAT team around my house. I think they practiced with me, Roger, before they did that to you years later. And then the day after I was arrested, the FBI interviewed Obama. And when you're the defendant, which is what I was, the defendant has an absolute constitutional right to get any kind of evidence that could, that would be adverse to him or actually exculpatory for him. And therefore, Obama was central to my case because he started the whole thing. He sent an emissary to me to make a deal to, to choose the senator that he wanted. And so we wanted those 302s right away because I had hoped that, that would help me show that I did nothing wrong and I could politically win my problem before I had to deal with going to court and I could remain as governor. Long story short, they covered up those 302s from the very start, and to this very day, those 302s by Obama are covered up. They tried me twice. They failed to convict me the first time on their fake charges. They tried me a second time, used unlawful standards. We wanted those FBI 302s of Obama's for both of those trials. They wouldn't let me have them. And the good news is that I understand that there's some prominent people in the media that are trying to get those 302s. And what I know about him is that Obama was interviewed for a long time, and those 302s are 13 pages long, and what's really frightening is the fact that every word of his 302 has been redacted. They're blacked out. So there's a big cover-up on what Obama had to say to the FBI the day after I was arrested. And, sunshine is the great disinfectant. A lot more things are coming out now about what was done to President Trump. I'm a few years ahead of what happened to President Trump, but we have a lot of the same people involved in both of our cases, and Obama is central to both of us, whether it's Russian collusion or the fake so-called sale of the Senate seat, which never was a sale of a Senate seat, was never a crime. Eventually, the appellate court reversed those charges. So Obama's 302s, I think, are vital, and the public has absolutely a right to know what he had to say the day after I was arrested. And, of course, I had a right from the very beginning to know what he had to say. But the bigger picture, Roger, is...
Rod, I have to stop you because we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show, and I say justice for Rod Blagojevich.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks. On March 14th, 2025, William J. Pulte was sworn in as the 5th director of the U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency following his nomination by President Donald Trump and his bipartisan confirmation by the U.S. Senate. In this role, Pulte also chairs Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and oversees the federal home loan banks. Before his appointment, Bill Pulte had a long-standing career in home building, housing products, and community development. In 2011, Pulte founded Pulte Capital Partners, LLC, an investment firm that focuses on building and housing products. As the head of FHFA, Bill Pulte has taken very seriously President Trump's mandate to expand affordable and available housing for the American people. He's emerged as a particularly articulate critic of Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, who seems to be softening finally to the idea of cutting interest rates, despite the fact that the two measures that Powell is supposed to use in determining whether rates should be cut, unemployment and inflation, are either at the same level or lower than they were the last 4 times the Federal Reserve cut rates. But it is in the area of enforcing mortgage laws and fighting mortgage fraud that Bill Pulte has really distinguished himself. Since taking this position, he has sent formal referrals with all of the documentation regarding a pattern of mortgage fraud by New York Attorney General Letitia James, Senator Adam Schiff of California, and most recently Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Bill Pulte, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thanks, Roger. Good to talk to you always.
I noticed today that Adam Schiff completely rejects your findings, saying that they are entirely inaccurate and false. Let's listen to Adam Schiff.
Mortgage company Fannie Mae says you're, quote, engaged in a sustained pattern of possible occupancy misrepresentation on several loans. Are these allegations true? How do you respond to them?
They're patently false, and the president knows it. In the housing agency, president's person Pulte knows it. He's essentially doing the president's bidding against me, against Letitia James, against this person on the Federal Reserve. Mortgage is their new weapon to go after their critics. But I've been very open about my residency, both in California and in Maryland, with my constituents and with the lenders. So there's no there. But the common denominator is they will manufacture anything to go after their critics, after members of Congress to try to silence them, after John Bolton, after people on the Federal Reserve, after generals, after former presidents. They're investigating Comey and Clapper, the Obamas, the Clintons. Basically, it's free reign with a corrupt leadership at the Justice Department.
And just very quickly, will you cooperate with the investigation?
Oh, well, we have, and we've refuted their allegations. In fact, we put it in writing. But it doesn't matter. What matters to them is the intimidation campaign, and they're going to mount it against anyone who stands up to the president. But I'm not backing down, and I have to hope that others will stand up to this increasing authoritarian form of government.
Bill, that's what's called Alinskyism. That's where you accuse your opponents and your enemies of doing exactly what you yourself are doing. It is Adam Schiff who said that he had seen, quote, more than circumstantial evidence of Russian collusion with Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, but was never able to produce any because there was none. We now know this because of the declassified Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence. So you can always tell when Adam Schiff is lying. His lips are moving, but I'm going to let you respond to Adam Schiff's claim that your referral to the Justice Department of him for mortgage fraud is baseless.
Well, no one should commit fraud, and no one should be proud of committing fraud, and nobody should be proud of anything to do with fraud, whether it be mortgage fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, you name it. And oftentimes when people commit mortgage fraud, they also commit wire fraud and bank fraud and all these other things. And I just don't understand why people can't understand that picture. I don't care whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, a wealthy person, somebody who's not wealthy, a prosecutor, a lawyer, a banker, you name it. If you commit mortgage fraud in this country, in President Trump's America, we're not going to tolerate it. And we're going to work our you-know-what off until we get either mortgage fraud eliminated or at least, 80-90% reduction in it, because it's just gotten totally out of control. And Roger, it's like a virus. And what often happens is people don't even know when they're sick because they get so used to defrauding people and lying to people with purposeful intent that they just think that it's fine, and it's not fine.
Well, I saw you in a great interview on Bloomberg the other day, and you pointed out that the documents from which you reach these conclusions are all public documents. They can all be found online by any citizen, so I decided to look myself. There is no question that Adam Schiff claimed that his condominium in Burbank, California, was his principal legal residence. That allowed him to get a tax break in the state of California. It allowed him to qualify for a lower rate on a lower insurance rate. But then on his home in Potomac, Maryland, he also claimed that that was his principal legal residence, allowing him, once again, a state tax break, also allowing him to get a lower mortgage rate and a lower insurance rate. To me, that looks like an open and shut case of mortgage fraud. Do you think that the U.S. Justice Department will hold this congenital liar, conman, and huckster, Adam Schiff? Will they hold him responsible?
Well, I'm the mortgage regulator, and so I'm going to kind of stay silent insofar as things that are not within the referral. However, I would say that, I've been very optimistic with Pam Bondi. She appointed somebody to really help lead this effort, and Ed Martin. And I'm very optimistic that to the extent that there is any breaking of the laws, and we believe that there is, and it depends on which case that you're referencing. Obviously, Fannie Mae's team came to a certain conclusion about Mr. Schiff. But in the Schiff matter, or in the Cook matter, or in many of the other matters, and we have many, many criminal referrals. It's not just, the ones that they like to talk about. They're the ones who like to talk about it. We don't even talk about them, frankly. I mean, we do because we have to get it out there and respond when people say things. But at the end of the day, the Department of Justice and the justice system will have to work, and I'm very confident that the prosecutors have the information that they need across all of our criminal referrals. And ultimately, people are innocent until proven guilty in our country, and we'll see where the facts go.
Yeah, I noticed in a Wall Street Journal editorial last week you were criticized for enforcing the law when it comes to mortgage fraud. It's almost Kafkaesque. It's so ridiculous. In every one of these referrals, I've read them in detail. The most recent one, Lisa Cook, who claims that her residence in Ann Arbor, Michigan is her principal residence. And then only 2 weeks later, she applies for and gets a mortgage for a residence outside of Atlanta, and she says that is her principal home and her legal residence. Are these people, maybe you can't answer this, but I'll say it anyway. I think they are just so arrogant. They're so used to the two-tier justice system in which liberal Democrat elites under Biden, under Obama, could break the law at will. That list that Adam Schiff went through, Comey, Clapper, Brennan, the former president, every one of those people engaged in seditious conspiracy. Tulsi Gabbard has proven this with declassified documents. This includes Hillary Clinton. This isn't conjecture. This isn't investigative journalism. These are cold, hard facts. In these referrals that you have made, in your role as the head of FHAA, in fulfilling your responsibilities to identify and refer any citizen, regardless of how prominent or wealthy or important they may be or not, for mortgage fraud.
That's right. I mean, do they want me to see this stuff? They want me to see the stuff and not report it? I mean, I have an obligation to report it. So if it passes our tests, which, we obviously are very focused on, we're going to report it, and we're not going to be intimidated by any editorial boards or whatever. I'd just say one thing. We have this thing in this country people often refer to as blue collar and white collar and all this stuff. Look, if at the end of the day you go to a CVS in Chicago or in D.C. or you name it, anywhere in this country for the most part, if you go somewhere and you steal a razor blade out of a CVS, you're going to get arrested. One little razor blade. So why do the elite and the rich and the wealthy and the politically connected class feel that they can go and save, let's say it's even $500 on a mortgage, which obviously these are there's way more money involved in these mortgages in terms of savings than $500. But why do they feel entitled to get $500 that they're taking when you can't even go and steal a, $10, $12 razor out of CVS? It doesn't make any sense. And so I'll make a prediction, Roger, which I think that people will view mortgage fraud way more seriously in this country going forward as a result of all of our actions.
When we come back, I want to ask Bill Pulte, the director of FHFA, about the incredible $2.5 billion renovation to the Federal Reserve's palatial headquarters in Washington, D.C. Bill and his family have been in the construction business, as has President Trump, for many, many, many decades. I'm scratching my head about how you could possibly spend $2.5 billion in renovation. At the same time, you're denying the working families of America a cut in interest rates, which I think is is due based on all of the measures that Chairman Jerome Powell is supposed to use. When we come back, I'm going to ask Bill Pulte, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, about what's going on at the Federal Reserve and what he thinks should be done now. Whatever you do, folks, stick with us right here in the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks. We'll be right back with the chairman of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, Bill Pulte. Don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're talking to Bill Pulte. He is the chairman of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. He has emerged as a very aggressive I would say, proponent of our current mortgage laws. He's identified a number of high-level public figures who are clearly in violation of these laws. Most recently, I think very significantly, Lisa Cook, who sits on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, very serious charges against her for mortgage fraud. But, Bill, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, is overseeing a $2.5 billion renovation to the already palatial headquarters of the Federal Reserve on Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C. I saw his testimony before the United States Senate where he said that this renovation did not include private elevators for the Federal Reserve Board governors, a private dining room for the governors, no new marble, he said, no new fountains, no lavish roof garden. But then I went online, I looked at the plans, and the plan includes all of those things. So it appears to me like he lied to Congress under oath. But then additionally, that $2.5 billion number includes a 70% budget cost overrun. You're in the construction, your family's been in the construction industry for decades. I saw online where you went down personally to look at the renovations, saw you wearing a hard hat. What's going on here?
Well, it's funny you ask that because, one of the things they try to make it sound like is, it's normal to spend this type of money on something. It's not normal to spend this type of money. You could build an NFL stadium for way less than this, or at least equivalent. We're talking about an NFL stadium, and here we are, just a government building. It's totally crazy. But yes, I accompanied the president on his tour, and then I separately took a different tour on the exterior of the building, and I will tell you, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think the scandal, Roger, is far from over.
Let's go to the question of whether it's time to cut interest rates on the American people. First of all, Bill, if given the great success of President Trump's efforts to cut much better tariff deals with our trading partners. So for the first time, we have trade agreements with our trading partners that benefit them, but also benefit us, has caused an extraordinary surge in federal revenues. In June, for the first time in 15 years, the federal government actually ran a surplus. This is, of course, after all of the economic elites predicted that if Donald Trump pursued his efforts to renegotiate tariff deals with our trading partners, that we would have runaway inflation. We would have a stock market would crash, unemployment would surge, and of course, none of those things have happened. In fact, just the opposite has happened. I saw Claire McCaskill, the former U.S. Senator from Missouri, on MSNBC the other night. By the way, if her IQ was 1 point lower, you'd have to water her like a plant. But she said that the whole Epstein controversy was an effort to cover up the fact that we have a collapsing economy. What planet does this woman live on, Bill?
It's crazy. They're not looking at data. They're looking at Trump derangement syndrome. It really is a sickness. And here you have what are supposed to be very sophisticated people saying all kinds of nonsense about stuff that doesn't exist. We were told, if you recall, all throughout COVID about, numbers and data and follow the science. Yet when you have something like this, they don't follow the data. They don't follow the science. They just follow their hatred for our great president. So it's really a scam, and it needs to change. And hopefully the Federal Reserve Chairman does something and does something soon. But I'm not too optimistic. And I think that, as I said, let's say he's got a lot of work that he's going to have ahead of him. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, Bill, what would happen if we got a rate cut in the interest rates tomorrow?
Well, obviously it would be good, but, he's too late. He's too late, Powell. It's too late. He should have cut a long, long time ago. He cut right before the election to help Kamala Harris. That didn't get her anywhere. And so now you have a situation where you have an economy that is doing good, but could be doing way better. And as you know, I oversee a lot of the housing and mortgage stuff in the country. And I can tell you firsthand, people can't afford homes. And a lot of it has to do with the mortgage payments. I mean, these mortgage payments are very, very prohibitive, and so much unnecessarily so. President Trump, like you said, he's crushed inflation. He's just absolutely kicked you-know-what on tariffs. And it's time that the Federal Reserve do their part. And frankly, I think that Jay Powell's legacy is getting worse by the day. And it's very sad, whether it's on the fraud behavior or whether it's on just some of this mismanagement stuff.
It is indeed difficult, as we see Americans struggling with their car payments, struggling with their mortgage payments, struggling to get by.
He doesn't care.
No, he's a financial
guy. He thinks he's so arrogant. He thinks he's so smart. He thinks he doesn't need to look at the data, and he knows better than everybody. And him and his academics all sit there and act like they're better than our great president. It's disgusting, and it needs to change.
What's really amazing is he's not even an economist. He's a lawyer. He knows nothing about this. He's never built anything in his life. The level of arrogance is offensive, I think, to the American people. All right, I want to thank our guest, Bill Pulte, who is leading the charge to actually enforce the mortgage laws in this country. And FHFA refers thousands of people for mortgage fraud. It's just the important, prominent ones that you hear about. The crimes have been identified in the cases of Adam Schiff, Letitia James, or Lisa Cook. Other people have been prosecuted and paid a high penalty for breaking these laws. So when you read the fake news editorials saying that this is weaponization or that these charges are not accurate, I urge you to go online and look the documents up yourself, and you'll find that Bill Pulte is doing an amazing job of enforcing the law and telling the American people the truth. Chairman Pulte, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?